Hi, I'm Matilda. My parents stood at a podium, read my obituary to a room full of people, and called my life a disgrace. They said I died alone, shamed, forgotten. But I wasn't dead. I was watching. They forged my death certificate, took my name, my voice, my work, and gave it to my sister. They even built a foundation in my memory, and made money off the silence they forced on me. But what happens when the woman they buried walks back into her own funeral? Would you stay quiet? Or would you make sure they heard you breathe? The day started like any other. The hum of my old coffee machine filled my tiny kitchen in Somerville. I stood barefoot, one hand resting on the chipped counter, the other wrapped around my favorite mug, the one with the crack along the handle I refused to throw away. I had 30 minutes before my shift at the cafe. Enough time to check my phone and maybe convince myself the world hadn't moved on without me. The notification blinked once, an unfamiliar number. No contact saved. It was from Elaine Dunbar. Elaine! I hadn't heard her name in over a decade. She used to live next door when we were kids, always trimming her roses at the exact same time every Saturday. Last I knew, she moved to Connecticut after her husband passed. I opened the message expecting something casual. Instead, it read, "I'm so sorry about your parents. I can't believe what I saw today." That was it. No hello, no question. Just that, and a link. I hesitated, thumb hovering over the screen. Something in my chest tightened, not fear, not quite. Dread, maybe? Or instinct. I tapped the video. At first, I wasn't sure what I was looking at. A wide shot of a church interior. High ceilings. Wooden beams I knew by heart. St. John's. The same church my parents dragged me to every Christmas Eve until I was 15 and refused to sing another hymn. The camera zoomed in slowly. My father stood at the pulpit, rigid as always, holding a folded piece of paper in trembling hands. Beside him, my mother in black lace and pearls, clutching a tissue like she was auditioning for grief. Behind them, a closed casket. Next to it, a framed photograph. Of me. I dropped the phone. My mug slipped from my fingers, shattering on the floor. I didn't move. I couldn't. My own face stared back at me from the screen, frozen in a moment I didn't remember being captured. It was the headshot I used for my last job application. The video kept playing. My father's voice was steadier than it should have been. He read the words like they weren't his. She died far from home, in a place we don't speak of. It wasn't the life we wanted for her, but she was ours. And we pray, wherever she is now, that she's finally at peace. I clutched the counter, breath caught somewhere between my ribs and throat. What was this? Some kind of elaborate lie? A stunt? I hit rewind, watched it again, slower, louder. My mother's eyes dry, her expression practiced. She died in shame, she said, voice soft but audible. But she was still our daughter. I felt something crack behind my eyes, a sharp pulse of rage or heartbreak. I couldn't tell which. Shame? Is that the story they told? That it died in disgrace? I paused the video. I stared at my image framed next to a casket that held no body. My body. Because I was standing here alive, breathing, trembling, and somehow already gone. I pulled up Google, typed in my name, my full legal name. The first result was an obituary. My obituary. No funeral notice in the local paper, just a digital entry on a memorial site. Maya Siverton, 33. Deceased. No cause. No detail. Just a birth date and a lie. I clicked deeper. Found a cached church bulletin from 2 weeks ago. This Sunday, we remember Maya. A life lost too soon. A soul misunderstood. Underneath, a photo from the service. Dozens of people. Familiar faces from the neighborhood. The woman who used to cut my hair. Mr. Delaney from the grocery store, all dressed in black. All there for me. And none of them had ever picked up a phone. My name, my face, my death, live-streamed. I sat down on the kitchen floor, the broken handle of my coffee mug digging into my leg. I didn't feel it. Not really. My thoughts were crawling over themselves. They didn't just cut me off. They didn't just disown me. They erased me. They rewrote my ending without telling me the chapter had closed. And the worst part? The world believed it. No one questioned it. No one checked. I replayed the final minute of the service. My father closed the paper. My mother bowed her head. A hymn played softly in the background. A moment of silence for a daughter they buried alive in reputation and rumor. My voice didn't shake when I whispered it to no one. They didn't lose me. They buried me. I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw my own picture next to that casket, my father's lips moving in slow motion, my mother tilting her head just right for the camera. The next morning, the apartment felt colder than usual, even with the heater rattling through the wall. I made coffee, though it tasted like ash, and sat down in front of my laptop. The church's website had archived the entire service. I told myself I just wanted to check if it was real, if it was some elaborate prank, a dream I hadn't yet woken from. But the link loaded without hesitation. There they were again. Same image, same casket, same perfect lighting. This time, I scrolled past the video. Below it, someone had added a note. Her legacy lives on. Click here to watch how we rebuilt through the pain. I clicked. And that's when the second wave hit me harder than the first. A video presentation played, well-produced, clean transitions, music that sounded like it belonged in an insurance commercial. Callista stood at a podium, bathed in warm light, hands folded over her stomach, like she was delivering a TED Talk about grief and resilience. The words on the screen read, "Rebuilding with Integrity, the Siverton Turnaround." She spoke softly, with pauses in all the right places. Losing my sister was the hardest thing I've ever faced. But from that grief, we found purpose. We redesigned our brand, rebuilt our mission, and committed to ethical leadership. My jaw clenched. The logo that faded in behind her? I designed it. I still had the original files on an old flash drive. Her pitch deck? It was mine, word for word. She'd taken the layout, the formatting, even the tagline I once scribbled on a napkin at 3 a.m. during a panic attack in the break room. I wasn't just cut out of the picture. I had been skinned, repackaged, and sold as inspiration. My name, not mentioned once. I watched the entire 15-minute presentation. Then I hit rewind and played it again. By noon, I'd found 3 more promotional videos, 2 articles quoting her as the soul of the company, and a podcast interview where she said, "Our family's loss taught me that clarity often comes through heartbreak." I slammed the laptop shut. It didn't stop there. I searched Maya Siverton obituary again. This time, I found posts on Facebook from old coworkers. One had shared the funeral video with the caption, "We lost a complicated soul. I hope she's at peace now." Another wrote, "I wish I had reached out more when she started drifting away." I hadn't drifted. I'd been pushed. They'd slammed every door, blocked every number, shredded every letter I sent. They didn't grieve me. They silenced me. And now they mourned me publicly, like it earned them redemption points. 20,000 views. 20,000 strangers watched people cry over a woman they helped bury. I couldn't look at the screen anymore. I needed air. I threw on a coat and walked through Somerville toward downtown Boston. The late afternoon sky had that dull gray hue, like the color didn't feel like showing up that day. The streets were still damp from last night's rain, and traffic hissed softly in the distance. I slipped my earbuds in, but I didn't play anything. I just wanted a layer between me and the world. As I crossed Beacon Street, a thought flickered through me, not loud, not clear, just a thread. If they could kill me in the public's eyes and profit from it, how long had this plan been in motion? I ended up at the public library and found a quiet desk in the back. I opened the Massachusetts Business Entity Search on the state's official site, typed in the company name. The CEO listing had changed. Callista Baird. The documentation was dated months after the obituary was published. No mention of a transition. No in memory of. Just her name. Full control. I printed the page, printed 2 more. My designs repurposed under a different title. One of them had my layout down to the pixel but with her initials in the corner. I looked at the stack in front of me. I hadn't died of overdose or suicide or any other tragic fabrication they'd hinted at. I had died in narrative. They buried me to rewrite the story, to turn me into a lesson they could use for profit, for PR, for clean slates and curated redemption. I shoved the papers into a folder, stuffed it into my bag, and left the library. At the crosswalk, I paused. There was a part of me that wanted to scream, to show up at their doorstep, wave the documents in their faces, demand an answer, demand an apology. But then what? They just say I was unstable, that I faked my own resurrection for attention, that the grief had made me delusional. Instead, I walked home. I sat down at my kitchen table, the same one I nearly collapsed under yesterday, and pulled out a notepad. At the top, I wrote, "Things they took." Then I began the list. The image hit me before I could even scroll. I wasn't looking for it. It just showed up. Someone had tagged it in a thread about grief and legacy on a community page. A high-res still from the funeral, perfectly lit, cropped just right. My face. The portrait had been framed in white lilies, just like I remembered it years ago when I gave it to my mother. It was a gift. My last attempt to say, I'm still part of this family. And now, it sat next to a plaque at a memorial I never asked for. The caption below the image, in engraved script, read, "In disgrace, we forgive her." Forgive me for what? I stared at the screen, my fingers numb around the phone. My skin felt tight, like it didn't fit right. That photo was taken during my 32nd birthday. I'd cooked dinner that night for all of them. No one showed up. Now it was being used as a symbol of repentance, their excuse to mourn a daughter they'd buried while she was still breathing. I closed the tab, but the words clung to the back of my mind like static. I opened my laptop and typed Callista Baird wedding into the search bar. I already knew she'd moved forward. What I didn't know was just how far. The video was easy to find. It was uploaded by a lifestyle magazine's YouTube channel with the title, CEO, Callista Baird's Intimate Garden Wedding in Cape Cod. I pressed play. There she was, laughing like nothing had ever gone wrong. The kind of curated joy people plan for months. I scrubbed through the video, trying to find a single frame where my absence might have been felt. My name, my photo, a seat left empty. There was none of it. Instead, there were cousins who once cried with me over movie nights, now twirling in linen dresses with flutes of champagne. Childhood friends I used to sneak cigarettes with, now clapping politely as Callista toasted to new beginnings. It wasn't the celebration that stung. It was the erasure. It was how they replaced me, like it'd been a rough draft someone finally decided to crumple up and toss. Then it happened. Near the end of the video, during a speech segment, Callista stood in front of a small group. Her voice was calm, her hands neatly folded. "This day reminds me that healing doesn't always come with closure," she said. "Sometimes it comes with courage." A little girl's voice broke through, barely loud enough to catch, but clear. "Where's Aunt Matilda?" I froze. The crowd in the video shifted. Some chuckled nervously. Callista's jaw clenched for just a breath. The mic cut. The video jumped to the next scene, her husband's toast. But it was too late. One tiny, innocent voice, had cracked the whole performance open. That girl still remembered me. Somewhere, in a room filled with people who'd convinced themselves I was better off forgotten, a child still believed I existed. I paused the video, letting the screen fade to black. I couldn't explain what that moment did to me. It wasn't redemption. It wasn't closure. But it was something. A tether, maybe. I put on my coat and stepped out into the dusk, letting the air slap some clarity into me. The walk to the Charles River wasn't long, but I needed the motion. The world around me was soft and dull headlights reflecting on pavement, distant dog barks, and the smell of wet leaves. I reached the riverside and sat on a bench, facing the water. No one was around, just the hum of the city in the background and my thoughts finally daring to speak. When someone disappears long enough, people rewrite the story, I murmured. But children don't lie. And photos, don't forget. I pulled a small leather notebook from my bag. It wasn't digital. That was important to me. No, something about putting ink on paper felt more real, less erasable. I flipped to a clean page and wrote, "My name is Matilda Siverton. I'm not dead. I'm not disgraced. I'm not done." My handwriting was shaky, uneven, but it was mine. As the sky dimmed into full blue, I slipped the notebook back into my bag. The cold bit at my fingers, and I tucked them into my coat pockets, pressing them flat against my sides. They could hang my picture on a church wall, build lies into legacy, carve judgment into marble. But they could not speak for me. If they wouldn't say my name, I would write it where no one could erase it. The envelope was cream-colored, thick paper, slightly worn at the edges. It sat there in my mailbox like it belonged, except it didn't. It had been forwarded from my old address, the one they stripped from me after I disappeared from their version of the world. No return address, just my name. Clean cursive, too neat to be an accident. Inside, a glossy invitation folded in thirds, the kind reserved for politicians or retirement fundraisers. At the top, Baird & Cummer Ethics Forum Rebuilding Trust After Loss. And there, on the RSVP card, was my name, my full name, not scribbled in, printed. And not just that, it had my signature. I stared at the swoop of letters that mirrored my own handwriting. Not similar, identical. I knew that loop on the Y. I developed it in college when I thought it made my signature look more confident. I pulled out an old notebook from a drawer in the kitchen, flipped to a memo I wrote back in the final year I worked with them. I laid the 2 pages side by side. Same font, same phrasing. They hadn't just taken my work, they'd taken my voice, my identity. My name was being used to promote a company that had declared me dead. For a few seconds, I just stood there, leaning against the countertop, the silence in the apartment compressing into my lungs. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just stared at that elegant, expensive paper as if it might start speaking back. I took a photo of it and forwarded it to Kevin, my attorney. Subject line, "This just arrived." He called 20 minutes later. "This is more than just a misstep," he said. "If they're using your name knowingly, we can pursue a cease and desist, possibly more, depending on what else turns up." I was about to respond when my phone buzzed with another call. Unknown number. I almost didn't pick up. Then something told me to. "Matilda?" The voice on the other end cracked mid-word. "It's Dellen." I hadn't heard that voice in over 3 years. My aunt used to be the only one who softened the tension at family dinners. She'd pass me mashed potatoes without passive aggression. She'd sit next to me when my mother made her opinion too obvious, and then, just like the others, she vanished. No calls, no replies. Until now. "I shouldn't be calling, I know," she said. "But I saw the wedding video. The little girl, I stayed quiet." "I have something I think you need to hear," she continued. "I should have done this sooner." That's when she sent the file. No explanation, just a download link titled junemeeting.wav. I opened it later that night. Alone. Laptop propped on the table, headphones in. The sound was muffled at first, like the microphone was under someone's sleeve. I recognized the voices almost immediately. Callista's voice rang out steady, professional, measured. "As long as she stays quiet, we're safe. No one asks questions. The further we move, the easier it gets." My mother's voice, "It's not like we did anything illegal." She cut herself off. And then my father, flat, cold. "If she resurfaces, we'll say it's a mental breakdown. Easy to prove. Her history, it helps." I pulled the headphones off like they were burning. I didn't even realize my hands had curled into fists until I stood up and nearly knocked the chair over. They weren't just reacting to me being gone. They'd built a whole narrative contingency plans, cover stories. They'd taken my silence and weaponized it. And now they were printing my name on things I never agreed to, painting my absence as a symptom of instability. I once believed maybe shame had driven them to pretend I didn't exist. But this wasn't shame. Shame requires guilt. This was strategy. The next morning, I walked to the Boston Public Library. I needed space, and more than that, I needed clarity. I sat at a table near the back with my laptop and a legal pad, played the recording again. This time, I wrote everything down, timestamps, quotes, every word they said. Not just for court. For me. Every line was a nail in the coffin they'd built for me while I was still breathing. I drafted a cease and desist letter addressed directly to Callista. It was short, formal, unemotional. Then I opened a blank document, started a new note to Kevin, attached the audio file, and ended it with, "One more move like this, and I won't knock. I'll kick the door in." I didn't feel scared when I hit send. I felt like someone who'd finally stopped holding her breath. The building looked like it hadn't been updated since the early 90s brick exterior, brass door handles dulled with fingerprints, and a small plaque that read Tolland and Associates. No receptionist. Just a wooden chair in the hallway and the scent of old carpet cleaner. I liked it immediately. Kevin Tolland looked younger than I expected. Early 30s, glasses smudged with fingerprints, a cardigan with one elbow patch stitched by hand. He didn't blink when I slid the folder across his desk, just nodded and opened it. Passports, lease agreements, W-2s, tax returns, medical records, employment contracts from the last 3 years. "Jesus," he muttered, flipping through. "You're not just alive, you're thorough." "That's what being erased teaches you," I said. "You keep receipts." He leaned back in his chair and steepled his fingers. "Okay. This isn't just a case of mistaken identity. This is willful legal misrepresentation. They filed a false death certificate?" "No accident," I said. "They used it to transfer ownership, scrub records, and redirect the business." He didn't hesitate. "We can challenge it. It'll be messy. But we can do it." We spent the next hour walking through steps filing motions, requesting internal memos, prepping for court if needed. His confidence didn't feel like arrogance. It felt like someone willing to go to war with a map in hand. By the time I stepped back out onto the street, the light had changed. Still overcast, but sharper. Less heavy. I stopped for lunch and brought my laptop to a corner booth. I hadn't even unwrapped the sandwich when a new email came through. Subject line, "I've stayed quiet long enough." No greeting. Just the sender's name, Theo Landry. I clicked. Theo had been one of the junior strategists at Baird & Co., back when I was still fighting to make marketing campaigns that didn't rely on gimmicks. We weren't close, but he was always observant, never talked much in meetings, but took notes like his life depended on it. His email was short. "I don't know if you'll remember me. I didn't know what happened to you until someone shared that funeral video. It didn't sit right." Then I started digging. Attached were 6 documents, screenshots, archived internal emails, presentations. The file names were gut punches, Q4, rebrand, final, V2.PIE hex, Baird, legacy, Dec 2022, Emma structure, circopy.doc. Each one was built on the bones of work it created years ago. Same frameworks, same phrasing, even the tagline I once wrote on a whiteboard during an all-nighter. Integrity is earned, not branded. Except now, Callista had inserted her name. Her photo, her quote. Theo's note ended with, "I'm sorry I didn't say something sooner. I was afraid. But this isn't right. You deserve to be seen for what you built." I sat there in that booth, the buzz of conversation around me, barely registering. People walked past the window with dogs, strollers, phones pressed to their ears. Life didn't stop for this, but something inside me did. I opened my files, pulled together every document, Theo's, mine, screenshots of the funeral footage, the invite, the forged signature, the video links. That night, I sat cross-legged on my living room floor, organizing slides like I was pitching a campaign again. Except this time, the product was the truth. I created a folder, Reclamation. Inside, I built the deck. Slide 1, my face beside my funeral photo. Slide 2, the real documents. Slide 3, the copied decks. Slide 4, the audio recording from my father. Slide 5, a single quote. Well, say it's mental instability. When it was done, I emailed it to one address. The shared family email used for business inquiries. Subject: one chance. I wrote, plainly, I have everything, every receipt, every word, every file. You have one chance to make this right quietly. If I don't hear from you by Friday, I go public. This is not a threat. It's a line. Step over it and you'll see how alive I really am. No reply came, but I saw the red receipt. The next morning, I walked to the courthouse. Not to file anything, not yet. I just stood there on the steps, let them see my name in the logbook, let them know I was circling. I didn't need to shout. Sometimes silence is strategy. I didn't want to go. But when the message came through an anonymous email, no signature, just a line that read, "You'll want to hear what she says tonight at the gala," I didn't hesitate. The ballroom was colder than I remembered. Boston Marriott Long Wharf. Same chandeliers. Same polished floor reflecting overpriced heels and rented tuxedos. I walked in like a ghost, unseen but completely aware of every eye that glanced past me without recognition. Callista was scheduled to speak at 8 p.m. sharp. The crowd had already gathered. Familiar faces peppered the room, former clients, ex-colleagues, even a few distant relatives who had no idea they were about to cheer for a lie. I stayed near the back, behind a marble pillar just off the bar. My dress was black, simple, nothing to draw attention. That night wasn't about me being noticed. It was about me seeing, really seeing, how deep this farce had gone. The host took the stage first, all fake humility and over-rehearsed charm. Tonight, he said, we celebrate not just innovation, but resilience. And who better to speak to that than our keynote guest Callista Baird? Applause followed like a trained response. Callista walked onto the stage in a soft blue gown, a string of pearls around her neck, and a sadness in her expression that made my skin crawl. She looked gracious, as if sorrow had polished her into something more worthy. I lost my sister 3 years ago, she began, to pain, to chaos, to a kind of silence that makes healing feel impossible. I didn't move. My fingers gripped the inside of my coat pocket, wrapping tight around the envelope, still containing the cease and desist letter. Still sealed, still unused. I used to think grief would break me, she continued, pausing perfectly for dramatic effect. But I chose to survive. I chose to become more. That was the moment the applause swelled loud, affirming, nauseating. I couldn't hear anything else for a few seconds. Just my own pulse hammering through my skull. My sister had stood there and turned my life, my erasure, into her narrative arc. She'd taken my funeral and built herself a podium on top of it. I didn't walk out, not yet. I stayed through dessert, through small talk and wine refills, until the crowd thinned and the lights dimmed. Then I went home. By the time I got through the front door of my apartment, I already had my laptop open. I didn't change clothes. I didn't even turn on the main light. Just sat at the kitchen table, bathed in the pale glow of the screen, and typed in her name again. It didn't take long. A fundraising page. In honor of Maya Siverton, sister, our sorrow, our strength. I read every word like it might explode. They'd launched a nonprofit, the Siverton Resilience Trust, focused on mental health awareness and grief processing. Every paragraph dripped with staged regret and manufactured warmth. Maya's passing was tragic, but her silence speaks loudly. In her name, we rise. There were photos of Miss smiling, arms crossed, probably taken from an old company bio. One of them was edited into a candlelit frame with the words, "Remembering in Grace." And then, the final blow. A donation tier named after me, the Matilda Circle, for those who rise above broken beginnings. I didn't cry. I didn't even blink. Instead, I clicked the report page button. Once. Then again, through 2 more platforms. And then I opened a new document, an open letter. Not to them. To the public. To the ones who donated, the ones who believed the story told by the ones who buried me. I wrote, I am not a symbol. I am not a cautionary tale. I am not a silent lesson. I am alive. And your donations are being made in the name of a lie. I signed it, name, date. Attached the documents Kevin helped me compile: the funeral footage, the audio recording, screenshots from the fundraiser. I scheduled it to send at 6 a.m. the next morning to 3 local reporters, a watchdog nonprofit, and one of the same online publications that had covered Callista's wedding. Then I sat back. And I breathed. If they wouldn't stop building on my grave, I'd show them exactly what the dead looked like when they got back up. The message came in at 7:42 a.m., just as I was reaching for my second cup of coffee. A friend from college, now a social worker, forwarded me a clip making the rounds on an advocacy blog. The subject line said only, "You need to see this." I didn't even finish pouring. The video was a grainy, dimly lit confessional, my voice, my cadence, but not my words. In the clip, I sat on a couch, eyes downcast, speaking slowly. I stole from my family's business. I didn't know how to stop. I ruined their name, and they still forgave me. I felt the cup tilt in my hand, coffee sloshing over the rim. That voice wasn't mine, not anymore. It was pulled from an old podcast I'd recorded for a startup panel 3 years ago, back when my biggest worry was if my click-through rates were tanking. They'd taken my voice, spliced it with AI, and turned it into a confession. Callista hadn't just buried me. She was now trying to cremate the pieces. I closed the video and called Kevin. "It's a deep fake," I said without even saying hello. "Send it," he replied. "Well, trace it." An hour later, I was elbows deep in metadata, browser tabs stacked across my screen. Kevin pinged me from his endhead, found the production credits tied to a boutique PR agency, one that had handled Baird & Co.'s rebrand last year. "It's them," he said. "Direct contract. I'll get the invoice." While he worked the legal side, I followed the digital breadcrumbs. It didn't take long to uncover the next layer. A launch video, brightly colored, upbeat music, footage of smiling employees in open workspaces. At the center of it all, Callista. Described as the visionary behind the rebuild, she stood at a whiteboard, walking through a pitch almost word for word what I'd presented 4 years ago at our annual retreat. The timeline, the voiceover, the goals, I could have narrated it in my sleep. Except now, her name sat in bold in the lower third of the screen. Founder, strategist, survivor. They took my voice, my ideas, my history, and dressed them up in pearls and press releases. Enough. That afternoon, I built the breakdown. On one side of the screen, the confession, stitched together, stuttering at the edges. On the other, the original podcast clip, full length, untouched. I layered the waveform analysis Kevin provided, labeled the AI fingerprint signature, attached the invoice from the PR firm, signed off by Callista herself. Then I filmed a single 2-minute intro. No edits, no dramatics. Just me. My name is Matilda Siverton. I'm alive. I never confessed to a crime. What you've seen is a fabrication deliberately produced to uphold a lie built on my erasure. I looked straight into the lens. If they want to silence me with a ghost, they'll have to bury me again. Good luck. Kevin helped push it to 3 contacts in the media, 1 from my former network, 2 from watchdog groups. The response was swift. By 6 p.m., the clip was gaining traction. Within an hour, a hashtag started trending. Were voice of the living. Then another. Not your dead girl. People were furious. Tech journalists dissected the fake. Legal accounts quoted my statement. A therapist's TikTok with 500,000 followers used my case to warn about narrative manipulation. I didn't bask in it. I didn't refresh every 5 minutes. I just sat in my kitchen, finally feeling like the air in the room was mine again. Then came the email. Subject: Media interview request. We want your side. I stared at the screen, unmoving. They wanted my side now, not because they believed me, but because the lie had lost its shine. I clicked reply. My fingers didn't hesitate. The message came in on a Thursday morning. No name, no signature, just a single sentence. They're holding a private memorial. Sunday, same church. I read it 3 times before I moved. Not out of fear. It was the kind of silence before an earthquake, where everything holds still just long enough for you to recognize what's coming. I opened the closet and laid out the black dress. Not mourning black, not church black. This was surgical, unapologetically fitted, unwrinkled, plain. The kind of fabric that didn't weep. By Saturday night, I had packed the folder: death certificate, forged; birth certificate, real; employment contracts, voice comparison charts, printed screenshots, and a flash drive. I didn't need anyone to believe me. I needed them to hear me. Sunday arrived cold and sharp. I parked 3 blocks from St. John's and walked the rest of the way on foot. The building looked the same, like it hadn't noticed the weight of the lies it had housed just weeks before. Stained glass glowed against the overcast sky, and someone had placed white chrysanthemums at the door. Inside, the congregation whispered. Most were in gray or navy, reserved grief, rehearsed sympathy. I slipped through the side entrance and stood behind the last pew, just far enough to watch, just close enough to feel the heat building under my skin. My mother stood first. She spoke like she was reading from a storybook. She was difficult. She challenged us, but we never stopped loving her. My father followed, monotone and careful. She was not perfect, but forgiveness is not earned by perfection. And then Callista. Pearls again. She loved her pearls. To the sister I lost, she began, pausing with faux gravity, and the life I rebuilt in her memory. They toasted. In a church, wine in hand, glasses lifted like I was some cautionary tale that turned into cash flow and pity applause. Then the priest raised his hand. Let us take a moment of silence for Maya Siverton. May her soul find the peace she could not find here. The room fell still. The doors opened. Not a slam, not a scream, just the long, ancient groan of 2 heavy doors splitting apart as I stepped into the aisle. First, a gasp, then another. A wine glass fell and shattered near the 3rd row. My mother crumpled backward, caught by the arm of a man I didn't recognize. My father stared, his hand still holding the folded eulogy. Callista turned, too slow to be shocked, too fast to be calm. I kept walking, one step, then another, heels tapping across the marble. My dress made no noise. My presence did. By the time I reached the front, the room wasn't breathing. I turned to face the portrait, still on the easel beside the altar, lilies still fresh beside my fake grave. I raised the document. This, I said, is a forgery. I slid the death certificate onto the pulpit. This voice? I pressed the remote. The AV system kicked in. My podcast clip played on one side of the screen, the deep fake confession beside it. The waveform overlay blinked like an EKG, exposing a heartbeat that never flatlined. Not mine, I said. But this pain? This silence? Every second of that is mine. I scanned their faces. Some looked away, some couldn't, and Callistache just stood there, frozen, lips parted but wordless. You didn't lose a daughter, I said, locking eyes with my father. You buried one, alive, because she didn't fit your image, because she made you uncomfortable, because she didn't disappear fast enough. The silence was a vacuum. No prayers, no music, just stillness. I reached into my bag and placed one final item on the altar, a small card with my name, Matilda Siverton. Clean, whole, not engraved in stone, not crossed out. I don't want your forgiveness, I said quietly. I want my name back. And then I left. The sound of my heels followed me to the end of the aisle. I didn't slam the doors behind me. I didn't have to. Let them echo. 2 weeks passed. I didn't hear from them, not a call, not an email, not even one of those vague legal threats wrapped in polite language. But the world heard me loud and clear. The deep fake scandal hit the press like a slow landslide. At first, it was a Ripple One blog post, a few retweets, some comments questioning the authenticity of the confession video. Then came the breakdowns from tech journalists, side-by-side audio comparisons, legal experts weighing in on the implications. Then came the statement from the Cybertone Resilience Trust. It was short, impersonal. Due to unforeseen circumstances, the Foundation will cease operations effective immediately. No apology, no name. Just silence in a polished envelope. And yet, it was loud enough. Callista's public persona began to unravel not with screams, but with questions. Her LinkedIn was quietly taken down. The company's Instagram shifted to private. Articles that once praised her vision were updated with footnotes about ongoing legal matters. My legal status was restored without ceremony. The death certificate was revoked, archived with a single line in the public record. Declared living. Documentation confirmed. That sentence held more weight than anything they'd ever said to me. Online, strangers began calling me the woman who came back. A few used the word survivor, but that never sat right with me. I wasn't surviving them. I'd outgrown them. On a cool Thursday morning, I took the train up to Newburyport, not to see anyone, not to confront. I didn't need to. I walked into the cemetery alone, the sky hanging low with slate clouds that didn't quite know if they wanted to rain. I found the stone easily. There it was, my name, carved in granite, birth year correct. The year of death, a fiction they sold as truth. I didn't cry. I didn't feel anything, really. Just a strange stillness in my ribs. I sat on the edge of the grass, pulled a folded piece of paper from my coat, and tucked it gently beneath the base of the stone. No fanfare, no drama. The note said only, "You can keep the stone. I'm keeping the rest of me." I stood, brushed the dirt from my coat, and walked back to the street. The cab driver didn't ask questions, just nodded when I gave him the station's name. Back in Boston, life had returned to something close to normal, but not the version I knew before. I wasn't hiding anymore. I picked up more shifts at the CAF, resumed volunteering at the library once a week. I began teaching a small marketing workshop at the local community center, which felt like building from scratch, but without needing to prove anything to anyone. One afternoon, I sat for a short interview with a local journalist. She was gentle, listened more than she talked. She asked why I hadn't sued, why I hadn't gone further, louder, publicer. I answered plainly. They erased me to protect what they built, but I'm still here not to destroy, just to exist. She blinked, nodded, and said it was the most grounded response she'd heard in months. That evening, I bought a new journal. On the cover, in thick black ink, I wrote, Matilda Siverton. I left the first page blank, not out of fear, but because not everything needs to be rushed into definition. The apartment was quiet, not heavy, not hollow, just enough stillness to breathe. I stood by the window, watching traffic hum below, people living lives that had nothing to do with mine, and for once, that felt good. Closure isn't always a finish line. Sometimes it's a door you close without needing to hear the lock click. No one from my family ever reached out. But for the first time in years, I didn't wait for them to. Forgiveness doesn't mean return. Some ghosts stay gone, even if they no longer haunt you.